Welcome to my channel, HFY Humanity. Let's begin.
The report came in at 0300 Standard Galactic Time, and Commander Vrael of the Thovian High Fleet read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated, because it was impossible. Say that again, Vrael said, setting down his nutrient flask with the kind of careful precision a being uses when he is trying very hard not to throw it across the room. Lieutenant Sook cleared his throat, which, for a Thovian, sounded like someone slowly crushing dried leaves inside a pipe. The human wept. Sir, Vrael stared at him. Sook stared back. The silence between them was the specific kind of silence that follows a statement so absurd that the universe itself needs a moment to reconsider its choices. Wept. Vrael repeated. Yes, sir. In the middle of the prisoner processing hall. In front of 47 Thovian soldiers, 2 Makari observers, and 1 very confused janitor named Dot. Vrael stood up from his command chair, walked to the observation window, and looked out at the stars for a long time. In his 32 cycles of military service, he had seen things that would shatter lesser minds. He had watched the Gorath collective implode. He had survived the silencing of Preth IV. He had once memorably been bitten by a creature the humans called a golden retriever, and he still had not emotionally recovered from that. But this was new. The human's name was Petra Voss, single operative, captured during the failed infiltration of Thovian Relay Station 7. She had, by all accounts, walked into the trap with the cheerful confidence of someone who had absolutely no idea it was a trap, which the intelligence analysts now suspected might have been the trap. Petra Voss was 29 years old by human reckoning. She stood 1.7 units tall, weighed approximately 68 kilograms, and had, before her capture, successfully disabled 3 Thovian warships, talked her way through 2 security checkpoints, using what the translation matrix described as a very convincing smile, and at one point convinced a senior Thovian officer that she was a plumbing inspector. She was, in short, a problem. And now she was crying. In the Thovian understanding of biology, crying was not a concept they had prepared for. Their species communicated distress through scent and the aggressive rearrangement of one's head fronds. They had studied human emotion extensively, of course. They had read the files. They had watched the surveillance footage. They had even, in a moment of desperate optimism, consulted a human cultural database titled, and this translation still baffled the entire linguistics division, Tumblr. Nothing had prepared them for the reality of it. Sook pulled up the footage on the command display. There she was, Petra Voss, sitting in the processing hall with her wrists in Thovian binding coils, and she was leaking from her eyes, steadily, like a slow pipe failure in a residential corridor. Is she damaged? Vrael asked. Our medics checked. She is physically unharmed. Poisoned? No. Signaling? Is it some kind of encoded communication? We ran the optical patterns through 6 decryption algorithms. Sook paused. Nothing. Vrael turned to face him. Then what by all the cold moons of Thov is she doing? Sir. Sook clicked his mandibles. We believe she may be sad. The word landed in the room like a dropped ceremonial weapon. Sad. The Thovian language had 47 words for tactical disadvantage. It had 22 words describing the feeling of having miscalculated an enemy's firepower. It had no word, not a single one, for sad. The concept had simply never been militarily useful enough to name. And yet, the guards watching Petra Voss had, according to the incident report, entered a state of what the behavioral analysts were calling extreme discomfort. One had reportedly offered her his own ration pack. Another had asked, through the translation unit, if she was okay, which he immediately regretted because she looked up at him with those wet, blinking eyes and said very quietly, I just Really miss my dog. The guard's name was Pren. He had 18 years of service. He had never once faltered under enemy fire. He had, according to his commanding officer, stared at Petra Voss for 11 full seconds and then walked directly into a supply closet and stood there alone for 20 minutes. He had not yet been debriefed, mostly because nobody knew what questions to ask. Vrael turned back to the window. Outside, in the black between the stars, the rest of the human fleet was out there. Somewhere. Quiet. Patient. Waiting. "Get me high command," he said. "Sir, now Sook." He did not look away from the stars. "Because if one human crying has done this to 47 of our soldiers, I want to know the official plan before anyone out there starts laughing." High Command did not have a plan. This was, to put it generously, concerning. The Thovian High Command had a plan for everything. They had a plan for supernova-level weapons deployment. They had a plan for first contact with unknown species. They had a 17-volume contingency document for the unlikely event that their own moon became sentient and filed a formal complaint. They did not have a plan for a crying human. Admiral Drez, Supreme Commander of the entire Thovian military apparatus, looked at Vrael through the communication screen with the specific expression of someone who had just been handed a problem they were absolutely going to pretend belonged to someone else. "Handle it," Drez said. "Sir, with respect, handle what exactly?" "The situation." "The situation," Vrael repeated slowly, "is that our prisoner is emotionally distressed, our guards are psychologically compromised, and Lieutenant Pren is still in a supply closet. Get him out of the closet." "We tried." He said he needed a moment. Drez's head fronds collapsed inward, which was the Thovian equivalent of rubbing one's temples and questioning every life decision that had led to this conversation. "Vrael, she is one human. One. We have an entire fleet. We have orbital cannons. We have the most sophisticated military infrastructure in this sector of the galaxy." "Yes, sir. And she is crying. And somehow that is winning." There was a long silence on the channel. "Send in an interrogator," Drez finally said. "We did. And?" Vrael checked his notes. Interrogator Fosk entered the processing hall at 0340. He lasted 4 minutes before he came back out and reported that she had apologized to him for the inconvenience of being captured. She told him she hoped she was not causing too much trouble and that she was sure he was, quote, just doing his job. Another silence. Fosk then gave her his personal communication device so she could view photographs of her dog. Drez made a sound that the translation matrix could not categorize. She manipulated him. That is what Fosk insists also, very firmly. While holding the pictures and saying the dog looks like a good boy, now here is what the Thovian military had failed to understand about humans. And to be fair to them, it was a subtle thing. Humans were dangerous in the obvious ways. They were creative, aggressive, relentless, and genetically inclined towards solving problems by hitting them until the problems stopped. The dossiers covered all of that beautifully. 46 volumes of documented human stubbornness, violence, and baffling dietary choices. But the dossiers had missed the other thing. Humans were also soft, not weak. There is a tremendous difference. And the Thovian Intelligence Division had spent so much time studying human weapons that they had entirely missed the weapon that was standing in their prisoner processing hall right now, leaking quietly from its eyes and making every soldier within a 20-meter radius feel an emotion they had no name for. Petra Voss was not performing vulnerability. She was not running a tactical deception protocol. She genuinely missed her dog. His name was Biscuit. He was a medium-sized brown animal with one ear that stood up and one ear that flopped, and he had apparently once eaten an entire couch. And Petra had not even been angry because he looked so guilty about it. She told this story to guard Pren when he finally came out of the supply closet because he came to check on her with a second ration pack and a look on his face that suggested he was running out of excuses for why he kept coming back. Pren did not understand most of the story. The translation unit struggled with couch, but he understood the way she laughed halfway through it, wet and tired and real, and then immediately looked sad again because laughing about Biscuit made her miss Biscuit more. He sat down on the floor outside her cell. He was not authorized to do this. He did it anyway. By 0500, there were 4 guards sitting outside Petra Voss's cell. None of them were authorized to be there. They had collectively brought her 3 ration packs, 1 thermal blanket, and a small decorative plant from the administrative corridor that Guard Senna had decided she looked like she needed. They were listening to her describe, in extraordinary detail, the plot of a human entertainment program involving a competition where people baked bread and everyone was very supportive of each other. Commander Vrael found them there during his 0500 inspection round. He stood and looked at his 4 soldiers, sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening to a human prisoner describe something called a showstopper challenge, with an expression of complete attention on their faces. Vrael opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Petra Voss. She looked back at him with her red-rimmed eyes and her borrowed thermal blanket and said, "Hi, do you want to sit down? I was just getting to the part where someone accidentally makes a bread shaped like their own face." Vrael did not sit down. He was a commander. He had a reputation. He did, however, stand there for the next 40 minutes. At 0600, he sent a second message to Admiral Drez. It contained only 6 words. "We may have a problem, sir," Drez responded immediately. "Is the human still crying?" Vrael looked down the corridor. Petra Voss was laughing now, properly, at something Guard Senna had just tried to say through the translation unit. Senna was, laughing too, that startled, helpless kind of laugh that happens when something is funnier than you are prepared for. "No, sir," Vrael typed back. "Then the situation is resolved." Vrael stared at the message. Outside, beyond the station walls, the human fleet was still out there. Still quiet, still patient. Probably, Vrael now suspected, laughing. He typed his reply. "She is not crying anymore, sir. She is worse. She is happy." He sent it, set down his communication device, and walked back toward the cell corridor. Because somewhere in the last 2 hours, without a single shot being fired, without a single tactical maneuver, Petra Voss had done something that 47 Thovian soldiers, 2 senior officers, 1 very confused janitor named Dot, and the entire Thovian High Command had not seen coming. She had made them care. And in the long and bloodied history of warfare across this galaxy, nothing, not weapons, not strategy, not sheer numbers, had ever been quite as dangerous as that. End the story.